Happy Samhain or Happy Halloween to you, my fellow magical experimenters. I am happy to be here with you tonight, and you can see I'm kind of doing my own costume thing right now here. I was a dragon today at work and decided to sans the mask to do the video. So today, what I want to do is I want to ask you a very important question, and it's a question that I think about a fair amount in terms of my own magical work. And that question is, what are you willing to give in order to get the results you want in your magical practice? And actually, tomorrow in the Magical Experiments Facebook group, we're going to be kind of exploring a variant of that question when author Ivo Dominguez Jr. Shares some of his thoughts around that in response to questions. So check that out in our Magical Experiments Facebook group. We're starting to do a Q&A special there, so I'm really excited about that. But anyway, getting back to the matter at hand, this is a question I think a lot about, because when you look at magical work in a lot of magical literature, what I see a lot of times is a tendency for people to kind of think that you just do your magic and there's no sacrifice required. There's nothing required in order to get what you want. And I think that in part, this has become this is a very misleading perspective that is shared a lot in the available literature out there. More the contemporary literature of recent years, more so than maybe, like 10 or even 10 or 20 or 30 years back. But I see this tendency for people to kind of approach magic with this idea of, well, I can just do magic to get what I want, and I don't necessarily have to deal with any ramifications or consequences. Well, as you know, I've talked quite a bit about consequences and results and why it's important to recognize that, when you get a result, there are consequences that come with it, and how to plan for those and factor those in. And not all the consequences are bad. In fact, many times they're great. But I think along with that perspective, it's also really important to explore this question of, what are you willing to give in order to get what you want? The fact of the matter is, there is nothing in life that comes free without some effort on your end required to get what it is that you want. And this is true in magic as well as in any mundane activities you do. I mean, you look at why people, for example, work at jobs. People don't work at jobs necessarily because they want to. They work at jobs because they want to earn money in order to purchase things that they want. Yes, I know it's a very capitalistic system, but there it is. It's the same thing in some ways with magical work. We do our magical workings in order to get results. And you might think initially, well, I don't really have to give up anything, Taylor. I mean, what are you talking about? But I would argue that when you're doing a magical work, there definitely is something going on there in terms of what you're willing to give. And let's break it down this way. First of all, there's just doing the magical work itself. You are giving up time, you are giving up resources, because you presumably spent money on the materials that you're using, the books that you're drawing your magical work from, whatever else. So you've definitely made a choice to give something over to that magical work. You're spending the time to do it, and that's just the surface level examination of what you're willing to give. Now, I don't think we should stop there. I think that when we really look at what we're willing to give in order to get what we want, we have to take a nuanced approach to this. It's not just about the fact that you're choosing to make some time to do magical work, or that you've spent some money on magical components or other thing, or books or whatever else. There is the experiential aspect. You are choosing to do this. You're choosing to have an experience with the magical work that you're doing. And that in and of itself is a choice to give yourself over to that experience. When I do magical work, I am giving myself over to that experience, and I am allowing that experience to transform me. and transform who I am, because it's not just about getting a result out there in the world around you. It's also about what you're willing to do to transform yourself to earn that result. And what I really mean by that is that if you fundamentally examine a result and what you're doing to get that result, what you're fundamentally examining is the simple reality that if you decide to go for a result, you are asking the universe not only to manifest that result, but to also change your life. Because what you're doing is you're undergoing a shift in identity. Now, you might think, well, Taylor, aren't you reading a lot into that? I mean, I just want a result. But really, any result that you get is going to transform who and what you are. It can be a simple result. It could be something else, but it is going to be a fundamental shift in identity. And you have to be willing to give up the identity of where you are and who you are to become the identity that allows and enables that result. One of the things that I've seen in magical work where people maybe get results for a little while and then those results go away is a fundamental rejection of the identity that they've tried to assume because of the fact that some part of them has disagreed with that identity. And this is where internal work comes into play. Because when we examine who we are and what we're doing and really examine the choices that we make, it informs the work that we consequently end up doing to transform our lives. You know, a magical working is a transformation of your life. It's a transformation of your identity as well as a transformation of the world around you. What makes an identity viable, or what makes a result viable, is the shift in identity. It's the choice to become something else. And it's the work you put into becoming that something else. Now, I see I have live people, so hello and welcome. And if you have comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the in there, and I'll answer them while we're live. Of course, I'll also answer them later. There's also the aspect of anything else you're doing in relationship to that magical working. And what I mean by that is, for example, any mundane work you're doing around that magical working to help you get that result. And typically we do end up doing some type of mundane work. If we want something, we're willing to create the path of least resistance, as I call it, to achieve that result that we want. This is why I marry my mundane work, whatever it is at the time, to the magical working that I'm doing. If I'm doing a magical working to improve, for example, my relationship with somebody, I'm going to also do the necessary mundane work of talking with that person, perhaps reading relationship books, and doing other things that will help me shift my identity to become a better partner for that person, and also to improve the relationship. And of course, I'm relying upon magic, but I'm also creating a path of least resistance to achieve that end. If I'm applying for a job, I'm going to do the mundane work of filling out the application and sending in the resume and going to the interviews, as well as doing the magical work that's going to help me stand out above my competition and allow me to become more noticeable. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about what you're willing to give in order to get the results that you want. We necessarily need to examine this question, because if we don't examine it, what ends up happening is that we do magic from a place of unsophisticated awareness. And what I mean by that is that we do magic and we have this perhaps naive perspective that it's just going to work and that everything will be just fine, instead of considering the fact that, well, there has to be something that you're willing to give in order to get what you want. Now, some people will say, this notion of magic comes at a price or whatever else is silly, Taylor. Like, you know, they had the Once Upon a Time show, and for a while people were doing memes about magic comes at a price. But I would argue that you know, there is a price that's involved. And it's not necessarily a price that you're unwilling to pay. It doesn't have to be, you know, done with the Once Upon a Time mythology where you have an unpredictable something or another occur because somebody's doing magic for you or you're doing magic for yourself. But there is a price. There is always a price. That price is that choice to shed your identity. It's that choice to do the work, the magical work and the mundane work. It's It's that decision to invest yourself in what you're going for. And the way I look at it is that if you want a result, you want to go all in. You have to be willing to invest yourself in that result and in what it is that you want. If you don't invest yourself in that result, then of course it's not going to work out the way that you want it to. And I say that as someone who's done magical work where I wasn't fully invested and the result didn't occur. And I say it as someone who's seen other people do that. You know, my approach to magic has been informed by that kind of realization, because I figure if I'm going to do magic, I better be all in. I better be willing to give it my all. And it's true with any transformation or change in one's life. If you really want to change your life, if you really want results, if you really want to do whatever it is that you want to do to create a meaningful change, you have to be willing to invest in what it is that you're looking for. You have to be willing to invest in doing the work and having the experience and in asking yourself, what am I willing to give in order to get what I want? And it should be no surprise here that the people who are really, truly willing to give in order to get are the people who get. Because what you're willing to give, in turn, does have an impact on what you get. And again, I say this as somebody who is very much involved in this right now. I shared recently in the Magical Experiments Facebook group, kind of the results of my long-term work with the element of creativity and using the sphere of art. I mean, this has been work that I've been doing for the course of 2 years now, memorizing the sphere of artwork, or chants, then doing the actual working, and engaged with the work of creativity, with the element of creativity through all of that. I have given of myself every single day to that work. And what have I gotten as a result? Well, I've written 7 books and published 6 of them, and I will publish book number 7. And I'll likely be working on book number 8 in this year. And because I've done all that, and also because I've been doing a ton of work around the business of becoming a successful indie author, I'm also transforming my relationship with my life overall, because I'm looking at the very real and distinct possibility of being able to go fully self-employed once again, only 2 years later, because of the fact that I'm willing to, because I've put that time in and that effort in, and I've looked at what I needed to do to transform my life. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, magical work doesn't just happen in a vacuum. You have to be willing to look at what you're willing to give in order to get what you want. And I promise you that if you do look at that, it changes your approach to magic, because suddenly you're looking at it from a perspective of, well, what am I really willing to give? What does this really mean to me? And I think that if people take that very, very thoughtful approach to magical work, they'll actually get more out of it, because they'll start to really examine, like, what is it I'm willing to give? Is this something that's worth that much effort to me? Now, I'll tell you that when you're willing to put the effort in, the results are truly magical. I mean, you can transform and change your life, and you can see some amazing things happen. But I think a lot of times people want those amazing things to happen without being willing to put the work in and the effort in. Well, if it's magic, it should just happen magically. They get into this notion of Hollywood magic or Disney magic, right? But that's not how magic works. That's not how life works. I mean, that's great on movies, but the reality is you put the work in, you put the effort in, and then you transform your life. You can have some amazing things happen because you're willing to put the work in. And this is really why I approach magic the way that I do, and why I advocate other people doing that as well. Because when you take that kind of approach and you understand that you're going through a shift in identity, and that you're doing other things to get you where you want to go, it really teaches you something fundamental. It teaches you to value the work that you're doing, and it teaches you to value the result and not take it for granted. And I want that for you, because when you don't take things for granted in your magical work, then you also don't take things for granted in your life, and it makes what you're doing more meaningful and more powerful. All right, so that's it for tonight's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll have it posted up on YouTube soon. And if you're following me on YouTube, feel free to subscribe and then click the notification. For that matter, you can do it on Facebook as well, I believe, if you want to be notified when my next video goes live. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.